Smoke poured from the sky like a bleeding wound. Burning wreckage from both fleets fell to the ground, crashing into the cracked red surface of the uncharted planet. No one expected the ceasefire to end this way. Not with betrayal. Not with this much fire. Sergeant Elias Ward, a human soldier from Earth's unified forces, dragged himself out of his shattered escape pod. His arm was broken. Blood streamed down the side of his face. He didn't care. He was alive but stranded, and his helmet signal kept repeating. No communication, no satellite lock, no support inbound. His boots sank into the ash-covered soil as he stood. Around him, the sky churned with dust storms and plasma clouds. This planet was not marked for any known life. It was supposed to be neutral ground. But the surprise attack had turned it into a graveyard. He heard movement. He dropped to one knee, rifle raised. Then he saw her. Across the field of broken metal, a tall alien figure limped into view. Her skin was glowing blue. Her armor was torn, scorched. And in her hand, she held a spear humming with energy. She was not just any alien. She was a Drell elite, his enemy. For a long second, neither of them moved. The wind howled between them. Then the alien woman lowered her weapon and collapsed to her knees. Elias didn't breathe. His training told him to finish her. But something in her eyes, piercing red but flickering with pain, stopped him. He approached slowly. She tried to stand, wincing from a deep wound in her side. She hissed in her native tongue, then switched to broken Terran standard. "I will." Not beg, do what your kind always do. But Elias didn't shoot. Instead, he knelt beside her, placed his weapon down, and said one thing. "We're both stranded. You help me live, I'll help you survive." The alien stared at him like he was mad. Maybe he was, but she was too weak to argue. She nodded once and passed out in the dirt. Hours later, Elias dragged her into a nearby canyon for shelter. The sun on this planet was unforgiving. He tore what little cloth he had left and wrapped her wound. She regained consciousness only when he fed her a small ration bar. She spat it out but didn't refuse the next bite. She introduced herself simply. Zura, daughter of Kelrin, blade of the 9th Starborn Legion. Her voice was proud, even in weakness. Elias gave a soft, dry laugh. Elias, nobody important. Just a sergeant who didn't sign up for this mess. For the next 2 days they stayed in silence. Their bodies healed slowly, but mistrust still lived between them. Zura kept her blade close. Elias never slept with both eyes shut. They shared food, water, and awkward stares, but no peace. On the 3rd day, a beast came. Not a native animal, this thing was engineered. A leftover war creature. Maybe from some ancient conflict. It came on 6 legs, armored like a tank, and roared with sonic waves that shattered nearby rocks. Elias shot first. The creature ignored the bullets. Zura threw her spear, hitting its eye but enraging it more. It charged. Zura pushed Elias out of the way and took the hit in her armor. Elias then leaped onto its back and jammed a plasma knife deep into its neck. The creature finally fell. Both of them were bruised and bleeding again. But something had changed. They had fought together. Saved each other. Zura lay back on the rock and said, "Perhaps I misjudged your species." Elias sat beside her, breathing hard. "Yeah, maybe. I misjudged yours too." Above them, the stars were visible again. The storm had passed. But rescue was still nowhere in sight. Neither of them said it out loud, but in their hearts, they knew. It would take more than luck to leave this place alive. And for the first time since crashing, they weren't just enemies anymore. They were survivors. Zura moved with the sharp grace of a predator, but Elias noticed the limp in her right leg. Even wounded, she scanned every ridge and crevice of the canyon. Survival made them partners. Necessity made them trust one another, but only slightly. Their camp was nothing more than a cave with a half-melted hull from a drop pod blocking the entrance. Still, it was safer than the open plains, where the ground cracked with heat and something howled every night from the distant mountains. Elias was wrapping vines around a makeshift spear when Zura returned carrying a creature that resembled a horned lizard the size of a dog. It was already dead. She dropped it at his feet with a smirk and sat down silently, wiping greenish blood off her blade. He didn't ask how she killed it. He just cooked it, using coals and a piece of metal shaped like a bowl. It didn't taste like anything familiar. But it was food, and food was survival. That was all that mattered now. They ate in silence until Zura spoke. "We are not meant to survive this planet together. Our war does not end because we fell from the sky." Elias looked at her and said, "No, it ends because we're too stubborn to die." The next morning, they moved out. They had agreed on a simple rule: find higher ground. If they could reach the ridges, maybe a rescue ship or passing satellite might pick up a signal. Maybe someone still cared they were missing. The land was cool. Windstorms rose without warning, peeling skin and tearing at their clothes. Some valleys smelled of sulfur. Others rattled with the sound of buried machines still active under the soil. Zura walked slightly ahead, always scanning. Elias followed, his rifle ready. Sometimes they didn't speak for hours, but it wasn't awkward. It was the rhythm of survival, and it made them stronger together. At night, they took turns sleeping. Zura trusted him enough now to close both eyes. Elias kept one hand on his rifle and one eye on the stars above. It was the first time he noticed she sometimes hummed to herself when she thought he wasn't listening. They found a broken structure half buried in the dirt. Not alien, not Terran, something ancient. Black stone twisted like vines and pulsed faintly with blue light. Zura stepped forward with a mixture of fear and reverence. Elias just frowned and raised his weapon. Inside was cool and hollow. The walls hummed. Symbols they didn't understand lit up beneath their feet. A drone, small and spherical, blinked to life. It scanned them both and spoke in a mechanical voice. Compatibility confirmed. Testing sequence active. Zura drew her weapon but didn't strike. The drone hovered and projected a map. A glowing route blinked through the hills to what looked like a tower. Communication relay damaged but repairable, the drone said, then shut down. They stared at each other. Then Elias spoke. "Looks like we've got a shot." The next day was the hardest. Creatures attacked them near a steaming riverbed. One latched onto Elias's arm with hooked claws. Zura tore it off and stabbed it 5 times before it fell limp. He looked at her, blood dripping, and whispered, "Thanks." She didn't respond. Instead, she bound his arm with cloth torn from her cape. Her hands were rough but careful. For the first time, her touch didn't feel cold. It felt human. They reached the base of the tower by sunset. It leaned slightly to the left, half buried, with vines growing over its sides. The door was sealed. Zura found a power node beneath a loose stone and reconnected it. Lights flared. The door opened with a hiss. Inside was a ruin of technology. Broken consoles and scorched panels. But at the center stood a terminal, humming faintly with power. Elias approached and wiped dust off the screen. A blinking command line asked for language input. Zura stepped beside him and entered her code. The system responded slowly, then showed a message. Uplink requires dual authorization. Non-conflict. Signature required. They looked at each other. Then they placed their hands on the panel together. For a second, nothing happened. Then the tower pulsed. A beam of light shot into the sky. Signal broadcasting initiated. They backed away slowly and sat down outside the tower, breathing hard. Zura looked at Elias and said, "If rescue comes, our people will tear us apart again." He nodded. "Then maybe we don't go back to our people." She tilted her head. "What do we become then?" Elias stared at the stars. "Something new." Something better, Zura smiled, just faintly. We'll see, human. We'll see. The sky above them flashed again that night. A signal beacon continued to pulse from the ancient tower behind them. But no rescue had come, no ship, no reply. Just empty static and alien stars. Elias stood near the cliff's edge, watching the horizon where firestorms rumbled. Zura sat cross-legged behind him, cleaning her blade with careful hands. The silence between them no longer felt heavy. It had become a quiet understanding. We did what we were supposed to, Elias muttered. We sent the signal. Now all we can do is wait. Zura didn't respond right away. Her eyes were fixed on the blade's edge, catching the light of a twin moon above. Waiting is dangerous. Waiting makes us soft. This planet eats the weak. Elias turned toward her. We're not weak. We're still here. She nodded slowly. Yes, but something watches us. I feel it, since the tower lit up. That night, they took turns resting beside a small fire of dried vines. Strange lights flickered in the distant hills. Zura never looked away from them. Elias dreamt of cities on fire and voices calling through static. When he woke, the fire was out and Zura was gone. He grabbed his rifle and followed the faint prints. She left behind. He found her standing alone beside a dark monolith half buried in the earth. Its surface rippled like water, though it was solid as stone. Zura pressed her palm to it. I've seen one before, she whispered. During training. These are precursor relics. My people say they judge the living. And sometimes they awaken. Things that should stay buried. Elias stepped closer, his voice low. We need to stay away from it. If it brings danger, we can't risk it. Not now. She didn't move at first. Then slowly she pulled her hand away. The stone stopped rippling. But something else began, a vibration deep in the ground. A low hum that made Elias's bones ache. They ran back to the tower. By the time they arrived, the earth had already begun to shift. Huge cracks opened in the canyons. Fire spilled out. And far across the hills, something massive emerged from the ground. A machine. Something more than a machine. A construct of metal and bone, shaped like a towering beast. 6 legs. A circular mouth lined with spinning blades. Its eyes glowed, red with ancient light. Zura froze. That's a precursor war sentinel. They were never supposed to exist anymore. Just myths. Elias raised his rifle. It's heading for the tower. Probably drawn by the signal. We have to shut it down. Now, they sprinted inside the tower. The panel glowed red. Warning. Hostile construct detected. System lockdown in effect. The beacon pulsed brighter than before. Elias tried to access the control code, but it rejected his input. Zura stepped forward and entered her own command. Still nothing. It recognizes us. But it doesn't trust us. It wants proof of unity. Not war. The ground shook violently. The sentinel was getting closer. Zura looked around the chamber, then pointed to the dual interface. This thing doesn't want soldiers. It wants survivors who choose peace. It needs us to do it together. They placed their hands on the interface again. This time, not as enemies. Not as species divided by war. But as 2 people who had fought. Side by side, the machine responded. The core of the tower opened and revealed a glowing crystal. The crystal pulsed. A wave of light shot out in every direction. When it struck the sentinel, the monster screamed. Its legs collapsed. Its body froze mid-step. Then it shattered into thousands of shards that scattered across the plains. Silence returned. But this silence felt different. Like the planet itself had taken a breath. Outside, the wind carried dust away from the tower's base. Elias stood at the entrance, staring at the broken pieces of the sentinel. So that's what ancient peacekeepers built, a weapon that only bows to unity. Zura stood beside him, And we activated it, together. That means something. He turned to her. We keep calling each other by rank, by species. But maybe that's what caused the war in the first place. Maybe it's time we forget all that. Zura hesitated. Her red eyes softened. Then what should I call you, Elias? He gave a tired smile. Call me human, just human. That's what I am. She touched the hilt of her blade gently, then extended her hand. Then you may call me Zura, daughter of nothing, fighter of no one. Just Zura. They shook hands for the first time. Not with suspicion, not with caution, but with shared strength. Above them, the beacon blinked once more, then stopped. Silence again. And now they were alone, but not divided. The sun rose slowly behind thick clouds of smoke. The broken body of the Sentinel machine lay silent on the plains below. Its jagged remains stretched across the land like the bones of a fallen god. Zura stood at the edge of the hill and stared for a long time. Elias emerged from the tower, carrying a small crate of salvageable parts. He set it down and stretched his sore arms. We need to keep moving. Whatever we did, it worked, but I don't think this planet has finished testing us yet. Zura didn't look at him. Her voice was steady. That thing wasn't just a weapon. It was a message. Someone left it here for a reason. And we woke it up. Elias walked over and joined her. You think it was waiting for us? I think it was waiting for anyone who could prove that survival didn't have to mean destruction, she replied. They traveled north, following the trail left by the energy pulse. It had scorched a straight path across the ground, and strange crystalline growths had begun to rise from the soil. The air felt different, less hostile, like the planet was watching. They reached a canyon rim where the earth had cracked open into a deep ravine. Below, water shimmered in unnatural colors. Above, vines glowed softly along the walls. It was the first sign of beauty they had seen since the crash. They climbed down carefully. The walls were steep, but the footholds were firm. As they moved, Zura spoke without looking back. In my culture, this would be called a trial path. If two warriors walk it and reach the end together, it means their bond is sealed. Elias smiled slightly. And if one falls, then the bond was never real, she answered. They reached the base of the canyon and found a pool surrounded by smooth stone. It pulsed with faint blue light. Elias knelt beside it and ran his hand across the surface. It rippled, but didn't soak him. It wasn't water. It was something else. Zura reached into her pouch and pulled out a fragment of the Sentinel's metal. She dropped it into the pool. It sank, then dissolved, and the pool brightened. A hologram rose, showing a map of the surrounding region, and a blinking signal to the far west. That's a precursor vault, she said. If there's a way off this planet, it's in there. They rested for a while before continuing. The ravine opened into a tunnel that led beneath the hills. Inside, they saw carvings on the walls. Scenes of beings not human, not Drell-handing weapons to both species. Symbols of unity, symbols of betrayal, and finally, symbols of silence. Zura traced the carvings with her fingers. My people called them ghosts. But maybe they were teachers, and maybe we failed their lesson. Elias stared at a figure in one of the carvings. A human holding a Drell's hand as fire surrounded them. Maybe this isn't our first chance. Just our last. As they emerged from the tunnel, the wind picked up again. A storm rolled in fast. Red clouds swirled above, and lightning cracked across the plains. They ran for shelter and found a hollow beneath a rocky overhang. Inside the shelter, they lit a fire. Elias coughed from the dust in the air. Zura sat with her knees pulled up, watching the flames dance. If we get off this planet, what happens to us? Elias poked the fire with a stick. I don't know. Maybe they'll treat us like traitors. Maybe we'll be prisoners. Or worse. Zura's voice was quiet. Would you choose exile with me if it came to that? He didn't answer right away. Then he looked her in the eyes. If exile means we live without killing each other, then yes. I'd choose that. The storm outside passed by midnight. They took turns sleeping again. This time, Zura lay closer. Elias didn't move away. When her hand brushed against his, he didn't pull back. In the morning, they started their journey west. The landscape changed. The air grew warmer, the sky brighter, and strange structures rose from the ground like old bones. They looked like towers but had no doors. Just slits at the top, where light poured out. Zura examined one as they passed. These are markers, precursor waypoints. We're on the right path. Elias reached into his pack and pulled out a half-charged beacon flare. He looked at it, then tossed it aside. We don't need help from anyone else. We'll finish this together. Zura smiled without speaking. For the first time, her expression was soft, human, and the journey continued. The land ahead was smooth like glass, reflecting the twin suns above. Every step echoed underfoot. The precursor vault was near, pulsing like a heartbeat on the horizon. Elias felt it before he saw it. A pressure in the chest. A whisper in the air. Zura's steps slowed. Her fingers brushed the hilt of her blade as her eyes scanned the empty plain. Something watches us, but not with eyes. It watches our choices. Elias didn't argue. He felt it too. The air wasn't just heavy. It was aware. They walked without speaking for hours. Around them, the world changed. The sky turned pale green. The wind no longer howled. Instead, it sang. The song was low and wordless, like the hum of an old machine dreaming. The vault rose from the ground like a temple. Its walls were made of smooth obsidian, but veins of glowing crystal ran across its surface. It had no door, only an open archway. With a symbol above it, two hands touching, Zura stared at the symbol and whispered, "Unity." Elias nodded. Let's see what the ancients left behind. Inside the vault, the air was cold and dry. The light came from the floor itself. Symbols moved beneath their boots. The further they walked, the more the vault seemed to change. The walls widened. The light deepened. And then came the voice. Two who were once enemies now walk as one. Zura froze. Who speaks? The voice answered with no source. It filled the air like breath. We are what remains. Observers of conflict. Keepers of the test. Elias stepped forward. What is the test? To survive without hatred. To act without domination. To walk together when you were built to. Stand apart. Zura tightened her jaw. We didn't ask for this test. We just want to leave, then prove your bond. And the vault shall open. Suddenly the floor shifted. A wall split open and revealed a long hall filled with mirrors. Dozens of reflections stared back at them. But they weren't normal, they were twisted. Elias saw himself, but his reflection was laughing wildly, covered in blood. Zura's showed her surrounded by corpses, her blade dripping. These are not our pasts, Elias whispered. They're what we could have become. Zura walked ahead, not stopping to look again. This is no trial of strength. It's a trial of identity. Halfway down the hall, the mirrors shattered. Glass floated in mid-air, suspended. Then the pieces formed figures, copies of them, hollow versions. Elias versus Elias, Zura versus Zura. The reflections attacked. The fight was brutal, fast, confusing. The copies moved with perfect knowledge of their moves. Elias was thrown to the floor. Zura screamed as her copy slashed her arm, but she didn't stop. She shouted, "Fall back. Fight each other's twin." Elias rolled and fired at Zura's mirror self. The blast burned a hole through its chest. Zura leapt and stabbed his twin in the back. Both copies shattered into dust. Breathing hard, they stood side by side. The voice returned. You do not win by defeating your shadows. You win by trusting the other to protect you. A final door appeared ahead. It opened slowly, revealing a room filled with light. At its center was a console, a single chair, and a glowing sphere hovering above it. The voice spoke again. One of you may choose. One may leave. One may stay. Only one signal can be sent. Only one name remembered. Ilias looked at Zura. That's not fair. Zura walked toward the sphere. They want to break us again. Make us choose survival over loyalty. Ilias stepped beside her. Then we don't choose alone. We choose. Together, they placed their hands on the sphere. The vault trembled, the light surged. Then everything stopped. You refused the rules. You bend the test. And so you reshape the outcome. The sphere split in two. Two lights floated above there. Palms, two paths, two signals. Both accepted. Zura smiled faintly. I guess even the ancients didn't plan for what we became. Ilias chuckled. We became more than they expected. That's what matters. Outside, the sky began to clear. The stars returned. And high above them, a flash of silver moved. Across the sky, a ship. A real one, watching, waiting. Rescue was no longer a dream. It was a choice. Together, they stepped outside the vault. No longer soldier and enemy, but something new. They were equals. They were ready. Asterisk. The silver ship circled high above them, just beneath the clouds. Its engines hummed low and steady. Ilias could tell by the shape it was Terran, old model. Built for deep-reach recon. But not built for war. Zura watched it with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. It's yours, she said quietly. Your people came first. Ilias lowered his gaze. Maybe, but we activated the signal together. That ship wouldn't be here if not for both of us. They stood outside the precursor vault, wind-tugging. At their close, the light from the twin suns catching on the glowing lines that now ran across their arms. The vault had changed them. Not physically, but something deeper. The ground trembled slightly as the ship descended. A ramp extended. Its metal feet touched the surface with a soft hiss. The door opened. A squad of human marines stepped out, weapons raised. The lead officer paused when he saw Ilias. Sergeant Ilias Ward, you're alive, the man said, lowering his weapon. Your beacon lit up every listening post across the quadrant. You're a damn miracle. Ilias stepped forward but did not. Smile, not just me. We made it. Together. The officer glanced past him and saw Zura. Instantly, every weapon turned toward her. She didn't flinch. She stood tall, her red eyes calm. Enemy combatant. Drell elite. She's coming with us. No, she's not, Ilias said sharply. She saved my life more than once. We crossed this planet together. She earned her place here, the officer frowned. She's a war criminal. Her kind destroyed 3 of our colonies. Ilias stepped between them. And our kind glassed 2 of theirs. That war nearly killed us all. But we stopped fighting. We worked together. If you can't see that, then you're blind. There was silence. A long pause that carried too much weight. Then the officer lowered his weapon fully. Orders were to retrieve survivors, not prisoners. If you vouch for her, she comes aboard as your responsibility. Zura narrowed her eyes. I don't need protection. Ilias turned to her. I know, but I'll stand with you anyway. She nodded once and stepped forward. The soldiers watched her pass but didn't move. No one said a word as the ramp closed behind them and the ship lifted back. Into the sky, inside the ship, things felt strange. Too clean, too cold. The metal walls didn't hum like the earth beneath their feet had. The lights didn't flicker like starlight. It felt sterile, lifeless. Zura didn't sit. She stood by the viewport, arms crossed. A medic tried to inspect Ilias's arm, but he waved him off. Later, we've got more important things to discuss. The officer returned and sat across from them. You understand what's about to happen. You're going to be debriefed, examined, maybe even isolated. People need to know what happened down there." Elias nodded. "I'll talk. I'll tell them everything. But I won't let you twist it into propaganda." Zura spoke without turning. "We didn't win a battle. We survived a trial. We chose unity over blood. That choice is what kept us alive." The officer leaned forward. "You want peace talks. Is that what this is leading to?" Elias met his eyes. "I want understanding. I want the next soldier who crashes on a battlefield like that to have a chance to walk beside someone instead of killing them." There was no answer, just silence again. But something in the officer's face had changed. Less doubt, more thought. Hours passed. The ship moved quietly through orbit. Zura finally sat down beside Elias. Her fingers brushed the edge of her armor. "Do you think they'll believe us?" Elias looked at her. "They don't have to. They just have to listen." She rested her head back against the wall, letting her eyes close for a moment. "If this ends in a cell, I won't regret it. Not if we changed something." Elias reached into his pouch and pulled out a small crystal from the vault. It still pulsed with faint light. "I think we did. I think the galaxy just hasn't caught up yet." And as the ship drifted farther from the planet, the vault below dimmed, its task complete. But the change it sparked had only just begun. The debriefing room was cold, too white, too quiet. Elias sat with his hands folded, his back straight, facing 3 humans in gray uniforms and 1 silent Drell diplomat. The others behind the glass watched from the observation bay. Zura was not allowed inside. "You say she saved your life," the woman on the left said, tapping a pen. "Why would an enemy soldier risk herself for you?" Elias stared straight ahead. "Because we weren't enemies by then. We became something else, survivors, partners, a team." The man on the right narrowed his eyes. "You claim a precursor vault gave you a vision. A test. Are you sure it wasn't just a hallucination caused by environmental exposure?" Elias shook his head. "No, we were changed. Not just in thought, but in the way the vault responded. It recognized us as equals, as bonded. That's how the signal was accepted." The Drell diplomat leaned forward slightly. "My people received a matching pulse, a mirrored transmission." She must have placed her hand on the sphere. "Is that correct?" Elias nodded once. "Then she passed the trial as well," the diplomat said. There was silence. One of the humans shifted in his chair. "So what do you want, Sergeant?" "A pardon for her, an award, a peace medal. I want her treated as more than a target," Elias said firmly. "I want her voice heard. And I want the truth recorded the way it happened. Not twisted, not erased." The others exchanged glances. Then the woman said, "We'll consider your testimony. For now, you'll remain in isolation." "She will remain under observation." Elias stood. "You can put us in separate rooms, but that won't erase what we became. You weren't there. You didn't see the monster she fought to save me, or how she carried me when I couldn't move. You didn't see how she chose peace." Security escorted him out. The doors slid shut behind him. He didn't fight it. He just walked down the hall. Zura sat in a transparent chamber. She looked up as he passed. Their eyes met. No words, just the unspoken connection they had forged in the wild. The next few days were filled with more questions, more scans, more tests. Each time, Elias gave the same answers. Zura spoke little, but her silence carried weight. Even the observers began to notice something different about her. When the final review came, Elias was called back into the same room. This time, there were more people, commanders, diplomats, even a historian. And in the corner, Zura stood without shackles, her hands free. A large screen behind them played footage from the beacon log. Their journey, their battles, the fight against the Sentinel. The moment they touched the sphere together, this footage was recovered from the precursor vault's relay node, one of the officers said. It confirms your story. The trial was real. Zura spoke calmly. We faced more than creatures and storms. We faced ourselves. And we chose not to be what we were trained to become, the Terran commander stood. What happens next may change the galaxy. But first we must ask, what do the two of you want? Elias looked at Zura, then at the room. We want to return to that planet. Not to fight, to build. Let it become neutral ground. A place for learning. A place to remember that peace can be earned. There were murmurs across the room. A few nodded. Others frowned. But no one said no. Zura stepped beside Elias and spoke with firm resolve. Give us one chance, not to destroy, but to grow something better. By the end of the meeting, permission was granted. They would return, not as enemies, not as fugitives, but as founders of something new. The ship descended weeks later. This time, it carried tools instead of weapons, seeds instead of explosives, books instead of orders. And aboard it, side by side, stood a human and a Drell warrior. The land greeted them with silence. The vault still stood, its lights dimmed, but not dead. Around it, the world waited, untouched, undecided. They built a shelter first. Simple walls, a roof, then they planted, then they wrote. Then they welcomed others. Not many, just a few, the brave, the curious, the hopeful, and in time, they weren't alone. A new place grew on the edge of the galaxy. It had no name in either tongue, but those who came called it the Crossing, because it was where two enemies crossed paths and chose something more. Years passed, not in silence, but in steady progress. The planet that had once tried to kill them now sheltered hundreds. Scientists, engineers, diplomats, warriors from both sides. Some came in fear. Others came in doubt. But most stayed in awe. The crossing had grown into more than a settlement. It had become a symbol. Where two enemies first survived, now two peoples cooperated. New homes rose beside alien stone. Schools taught both Terran Standard and Drell. Glyphs, rituals blended. Traditions mixed. Zura stood on a balcony overlooking the valley where the precursor vault still pulsed gently beneath the soil. Children from both species ran along the smooth paths carved by wind and time. She wore no armor, only a simple robe tied at the waist. Behind her, Elias entered carrying 2 mugs of warm brew. He handed her one, his face calm and marked with new lines of age. Scouts came back. They found another relic site east of the Molten Ridge. Same symbol. 2 hands touching. Zura took a sip and smiled. They're watching still. Measuring what we build. Elias leaned on the railing. Then I hope they see this. And I hope they see it's working. The peace hadn't been easy. There were threats. Raiders who saw unity as betrayal. Leaders from both sides who called them traitors. Sabotage attempts. False broadcasts. But every time the ground shook, they rebuilt together. When a Drell elder fell sick, human medics saved her. When a Terran child was lost in the jungle, Drell hunters brought him back. Each act was a stone in the foundation of trust. One morning, a transport ship arrived unannounced. Painted in the old war colors, its engines burned hot. Its markings were sharp. Elias stood at the landing pad, rifle slung over his shoulder. He wasn't afraid, but he was ready. The ramp lowered. A woman in decorated armor stepped out. She bore Terran medals and a grim expression. Behind her stood soldiers, but their weapons remained holstered. Sergeant Elias Ward, she said. I'm Commander Thorne. I came to see if the stories are true. Elias gestured toward the settlement. See for yourself. Walk with me. No speeches, no threats. Just your eyes and your mind, she agreed. Zura joined them. The presence of an armed Terran officer didn't make her flinch. She walked like she always had, with purpose, with pride. The children stared but did not fear. The builders waved but kept working. Commander Thorne said little during the tour. But at the end, she paused in front of the Unity statue in the square. It showed a human hand reaching down. A Drell hand reaching up, a bond, not a rescue. Equals. My father died in the siege of Varus Point, she said quietly. He would have hated this place. He was raised to believe Drell blood was poison, Elias answered gently. My uncle died in the orbital ambush of Elix II. I was raised to believe your kind were monsters, Zura added. And yet here we are, alive, together, building. The commander nodded slowly. The galaxy may not be ready for this. But maybe it doesn't need to be. Maybe it just needs a seed. She returned to her ship. Left without incident. A week later, supply crates arrived from the Terran fleet. Marked unregistered aid. More. Followed food, medicine, learning tech. Then came envoys from neutral worlds. Then came those who had no world left. The crossing opened its arms to all. Elias and Zura stood side by side at each council meeting. Not as rulers, not as soldiers, but as guides. They made decisions slowly, fairly, always together. One night, under the pale blue stars, Elias stood by the vault again. The light pulsed in rhythm with his breath. Zura approached, her eyes reflecting the glow. It hasn't spoken in years, she said softly. Maybe it doesn't need to, Elias replied. Maybe it spoke once. And that was enough. They stood in silence. The wind moved around them, like a living thing. In that moment, they didn't need words. Their story had already been told, not with weapons, but with choice. Not with victory, but with change, and the galaxy would never be the same.